Sweet Lord.
Is that what it typically
I don't know. We're going to see. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Oh my gosh.
I think we're on. All right. I think we're on here, Kira.
Oh, hey, we're on.
I think.
Okay.
It looks like we are.
All right. Well, this is an auspicious way to come back.
I know. Well, you know what? It's my first day back from vacation. I've had too much coffee, so like I'm ready to fight.
Oh, with me?
No, just like
okay,
generally,
good.
just like ready to.
Like you're in fighting shape. Like, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
I love it. That's exactly where I want you. I think that's perfect. Okay. Well, I don't see anybody on the chat yet. Maybe people forgot that this exists.
I mean,
because it's been a while since we've done it.
Did you forget it existed?
No comment.
Okay.
So, but I'm here now, and I think that's the important thing.
That is the important thing. Well, good morning, Phil.
Oh, good morning, Kira. Let's introduce ourselves.
Who are you?
Oh, no. Me first. You first, huh? Me first. Okay. I'm Philip DeVaul. And I am, what am I? I'm rector at Church of the Redeemer in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Queen City of the Midwest. And what about you?
I am the Reverend Kira Austin Young, priest in charge of St. Anne's in Nashville. And yesterday was our patronal feast day. It was the feast of St. Anne.
Whoa. Tell me St. Anne. I used to know.
Who is St. Anne?
Well, let's get nerdy with it. Who's St. Anne?
This is a question that many people who attend my church don't even really know. St. Anne is the mother of Mary and the grandmother of Jesus. And while her and her husband are not mentioned by name in the canonical Gospels, they are mentioned in what's called the Infancy Gospel of James.
All right.
And they were a wealthy, educated couple living in Nazareth, and they struggled to have children and prayed to the Lord. And like Anne, so Anne would be Hannah in like the Hebrew, and so like her namesake in 1 Samuel, they prayed to the Lord and promised to dedicate their child to the service of God. Were they to have one, and the Lord heard their prayers and gave them Mary. We're also joined today by Tilda, one of my cats. And so Saint Anne is the patroness saint of educators, actually, because it's tradition holds that she taught Mary to read. That Mary was actually a well-educated woman of her time, and she is also the saint of mothers of women who are people who hope to be pregnant and those who are in labor to give birth, and grandparents. Her and Joachim, her husband, are patron saints of grandparents. So
I used to be down the street from a Saint Joachim.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that's who that is.
So I have so many questions. So this is within Christian tradition, because biblically Anne doesn't show up.
Biblically, right, in our like canonical Gospels.
Sure. So yeah.
Yeah.
So there are non-canonical Gospels where Anne shows up?
There are, yeah, the infancy narrative.
Oh, right,
of
you
James.
said that. Right. Okay. Yes, you said that. Okay.
There's also some tradition that gets relayed through some popes' letters that Saint Anne was buried in the south of France. That some of those saints, Lazarus and Mary Magdalene, and a few folks left Jerusalem during a period of persecution and got on a boat and traveled to France, where they landed. So,
wow.
There's
so many questions.
So a bunch of wacky, I mean, it's I wouldn't say it's wacky. I was just thinking about this morning, and it's one of those things where like, you can take what's meaningful and sort of leave the rest, like,
very American of you.
Yeah. obviously, probably Mary had parents and Jesus had grandparents, and
This is likely.
Those people probably factored into their lives.
It's interesting, the idea of Mary coming from essentially a wealthy family, because then she marries this carpenter. There's a lot to unpack there.
Right. Well, I mean, and wealthy meaning like not royal, but like, well,
like not on the right,
educated.
Right.
And I mean, I think I do think we kind of I don't know, we have this idea, especially as contemporary people, of somebody working with their hands as a person who
we create blue collar versus white collar.
Yeah.
Whereas the community might have seen that differently.
Right. Well, I mean, and really that word that Joseph is called in the Greek is not really carpenter. It's more of an artisan. So, you're thinking less maybe somebody, say contemporarily, somebody who's like working in the sun building houses, and more maybe somebody who's like fashioning a fancy dinner table, like
right. He made humidors and and shoe trees and things like that.
Right.
I don't know. All of this conversation about Anne, it definitely my Protestant cackles are raised, right? Like I'm like a cat. The back of the hairs are all sort of.
I know. You're like,
a little,
not in the Bible. I don't know.
I don't know what to do with that information. Hey, by the way, Leslie's here. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
It's good to have you with us. Leslie is bringing in, by the way, brought a question to the table that's going to be the centerpiece of the main piece of our conversation today, because I think it'll take the whole time, frankly. But we talked a little bit about St. Anne. I used to be at a church called St. John the Divine, and which, of course, the one who divines the revelation of God. So John the Revelator is another term, which I think also sounds pretty cool. There's some good blues songs about John the Revelator. Listen to Blind Willie Johnson sing about John the Revelator. But most people from St. John the Divine did not make that connection at my previous church. And a lot of times in the tradition, he doesn't have a feast day, because all of the Johns, John the disciple, John the evangelist, John the author of the pastoral letters, or the Johannine letters, and then John the divine, John the Revelator, very well could have been 2, 3, 4 different people.
Just too many Johns.
Too many Johns. Still today, it's a problem we have.
Yeah, you got John the Baptist. You got,
it's a good name. It's always, I actually feel like when someone in our time names someone John, I'm like, wow, you went for it. Like, you didn't try to be like, like you didn't pick some name that is, I don't know, you didn't create a new name or try to find a name that wasn't going to fit. They were just like, John, I'm happy with it. What's the problem?
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. Mary too. Anyone some Mary. I'm like, good for you. You did it. You did it. Emily, fantastic. I love this. This is what I'm talking about. But anyways, so
classics. Yeah.
They're classics. These are classics names. So anyways, but people, so we did a lot of work at my previous parish about sort of like who John the Divine was and what that meant. And like it was really beautiful to like delve into Revelation and delve into that thing. But we didn't have a feast day because of it.
Oh.
And now I'm Church of the Redeemer. What's the Redeemer feast day?
Every Sunday.
Every dang day. just living here in eternity.
In the redeemed state, right?
Redeemed state, in the already and the not yet. Mary Osterbrock's with us too. Mary, welcome. It's so good to have you. It's good to be back doing this. How was your vacay?
It was good. I went
hiking.
You
did some hiking.
Did some hiking, went to visit my best friend in Fort Collins, Colorado, and we took a little trip to Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park, which was really remarkable. And then just kind of like we hung out, did some swimming, did some hiking, did some visiting a lot of parks and just kind of a lot of watching the Olympics.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really nice.
So how is it that your best friend is in Fort Collins and you're in Nashville?
So we've been best friends since our junior year of high school.
Oh yeah.
And she is a music theory professor at Colorado State University, and that's why she's in Fort Collins, which is a great place to live. I mean, there's a lot of it's the bike infrastructure there is great. It's, you know, on the Front Range of the mountains, and got a lot of great breweries there, and just a really kind of lovely, lovely place. So
I love that you guys have stayed connected that long.
Yeah. So what did you do on your summer vacation?
Well, I went back to California to visit some friends and family, but I was just thinking about like I'm like, wow, no one who's known me that long still likes me. So it's really amazing that you kept that up that long. I took a month off, as many of you know, and all I need is 2 months more and then I'll feel okay. But that month was a good month off. And we did a week of staycation and then 2 weeks in California and then another week of staycation and then back at it. A lot of, I mean, 3 kids, got to run them around and do that whole thing. But we had a nice time, got to see family, got to see people that we love very much and haven't seen in quite a long time. I had not seen my oldest brother in over 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's too long. And then all of my wife's family, we hadn't seen since they were out here for her birthday in December and January of 2020 for like a minute. I mean, they were here for a little bit of time, but it was like a part of January 2020. Yeah. So that was the last time I'd seen any of them. And man, that year and a half, really, you know, we all aged like, I mean, there's so much more white here, and it's not because I stopped coloring it. I never colored it. It just showed up. And that's not, I don't care. It's fine. I'm not, but it's just like, we've all just kind of, man.
It's been tough. And it's kind of, yeah, it's sort of written on people's faces in a way that, I mean, including my own, I'll say.
Yeah, right.
Just the kind of difficulties of this past year and a half. And like I said, my best friend is a college professor, and so is her husband. So they've done, you know, they had to transition to teaching remotely, right? And recording videos and doing all that stuff. And they were kind of saying like, yeah, like we have students that like we've never met, you know?
Right. And we can do it and we pulled it off, but this is not how I want to live.
No.
Like, we're made for each other, and I want to like be around people in a real and practical, physical way as we're able to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it was good. Oh, you know what? Leslie pointed out that at Redeemer, we feast. She said maybe our feast days are Shrove Tuesday, and she pointed out we do a chili cook-off every year.
Yeah, like a literal feast, a literal.
Yeah, literal. I like those. Are my favorite kind of feast is the one where I'm literally eating a lot of food. That's my kind of. I don't want to like. Oh, it's a metaphorical feast.
No, you should actually feast on feast days.
Yeah, give me a lot of food. Like, yeah. Don't metaphorically feed me. Goodness gracious. All right. But enough about that. Do we want to get to the question? Oh, Betsy Berry's here all the way from Martha's Vineyard.
Ooh, fancy.
Jealous. I'm jealous is what I am. She's got her feet in the water over there, the Atlantic. So, okay. We got a really good question. I want us to make sure we have some time to delve into it. Do you want to ask it? Do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
You can read it. I can read it, but it's the print is very small. So on my
sure. That's accurate. So hold on. Here we go. Here's the question, and I think it's a great question. Kira and Phil, why do we avoid the quote unquote us versus them mentality when talking about other Christians who weaponize the Bible to hurt people? Wouldn't it be more in line with Jesus' teachings to stand up for those who have been hurt and denounce the people who are abusing his teachings to harm others? You've talked about how we're not supposed to say that we're not like those Christians, but why should we not do that when they are causing harm in the world? Kira? Where shall we start?
So the first place I kind of went is that, to me, this is a, best not point out the log in someone else, or the splinter in someone else's eye when there's a log in our own eye. And, while we in the Episcopal Church or more progressive churches kind of like to pat ourselves on the back for being open and accepting and being kind of forward thinking, or whatever we like to kind of couch that as, even though, we may think of it, and I certainly do, as kind of a biblical and theological mandate. We have not always been that way. And even in my lifetime and in my career, I have run into sexism. I've run into homophobia. I've run into a lot of different things that that do this thing, that kind of weaponize the Bible or weaponize the tradition or weaponize whatever to kind of push back against what we might hold. And at the same time, we're not fully liberated, right? We're not living in kind of the fullness of God's kingdom and God's realm. And it can be hard to know what we're doing right now that might be perceived by others at a later date as wrong, as misguided, as hurtful. I've been thinking a lot about these boarding schools for Indigenous people. Yeah. And some of those were run by Episcopalians and run by the Episcopal Church. And, and people thought they were kind of doing a good thing. They thought they were helping, Indigenous peoples kind of get, what is the word?
They thought they were saving the savages from hell.
Right. And helping them, fit into what is, what we would kind of define as white culture.
Yep.
So, as easy as it is to kind of look back and say, like, well, obviously that was wrong. I always kind of wonder in the back of my mind, like, what are we doing that we think is even not necessarily right, but just normal or just part of the status quo, that future generations will look back and go, how could they have not known? So that's kind of where I initially thought of. I mean, I think there is a way of talking about what we believe and how other traditions or other denominations or other Christians, what we believe is kind of a misunderstanding of the tradition or of the gospel. And I think it's an inter-sibling dispute, I guess, in that sense.
So part of it for me, you started with the place that sits. One of the things you started with was this pulling the plank out of our own eye before we point out the speck in someone else's eye. The idea, we need to, like, when we speak we need to make sure that we have any integrity to speak with any kind of moral authority. So do we speak? So now we have, as a tradition, come to a place where our denomination has made, clear claims and stances on the full inclusion and empowerment of LGBTQ plus people, for instance, in all levels of ministry, and recognizing the blessing of their marriage and their relationships. But we're still in the midst of learning what that means about us. So we can be proud that we say that, but we need to figure out, like, what is that? Like, are we in a place where we have the right to speak well of it? Or in a church that's still so entrenched culturally in white supremacy, do we have any right to speak as if we're better than other churches? And then you go into that language that you spoke about, this being, there is an aspect of, there's a lot of issues when you look in the New Testament where the writers are just like, they denounce other people, but they also work really hard at, like, we are meant to belong to each other. And there's this one where Paul's like, you're taking each other to court? Yeah. Like, we're Christians. We should be able to sort this out within we should be able to honestly, truly deal with reconciliation without getting the authorities involved. That, of course, can be twisted and used in a lot of negative ways where things are kept secret instead of being made transparent. So I don't want to make light of that. This idea that Paul believed that our ability to be community meant we should be able to work these things out. But Paul also was the one who talked about speaking the truth in love and wrote openly about like denouncing other people who were saying things that were contrary to the gospel. I mean, Leslie, who asked the question, was in our Galatians Bible study, and Paul's just not having any of that nonsense. Like you say,
wicked Galatians.
Yeah, no, you foolish. No, you foolish.
Foolish. Sorry.
No, it's okay. You know, who has captivated your minds? And then he says, I wish these people who keep talking about the circumcision would just go ahead and recircumcise themselves. He says would just castrate themselves. And he talks openly about ripping up Paul or Peter in person. And, so we have an example of prophetic utterance against other Christians. We also know we're of this world. We live in this world. We're part of this culture. I don't know about you, Kira, but I have heard so many people talk about, as I was kind of maybe going into my 20s, sort of like none of these Christians can even agree with each other. Like they can't even get along. Mm-hmm. We come out of a history of Christians killing each other for being the wrong kind of Christian.
Yeah.
Of Christians saying you're not even a real Christian to us. People telling me I'm not a real Christian because I don't read the Bible the right way. I've been denounced by people from other traditions.
Oh yeah, my priesthood is not. I'm a fake priest as a woman. Yeah.
Right. So I think we all come at this with a reticence to spend our time sort of specifically attacking or verbally, but not physically, but specifically sort of denouncing whole swaths of Christians. But I'm feeling more and more convicted in my work that, like, I don't know, like at the very least, we need to very, very loudly proclaim what we are. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily need to say that place isn't real, because there's a lot of maybe positive things that are happening in that space. There's a mega church down the road from me that I have just legion of issues with this church. And I think they do damage. Frankly, I think they do damage. And also, it has been a good place for a lot of people to encounter Christ for the first time. And that's not fake. It's not false. But they have done, even in the last week, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, they had a guest speaker who basically just got up and talked about, like, essentially the myth of transgenderism and right. And this is the biggest church in Cincinnati, and it's right down the street from us, and how trans healthcare is bad, and how, and it goes on, right? Like if we really wanted to help gay people, we would help them not be gay, things like that. Mm-hmm. And this church has rightfully come under just a ton of fire from a lot of people. Now, a lot of us were like, yeah, we already knew they actually thought that. There's something I'm actually kind of grateful for the accidental transparency. Accidental meaning like they took the video offline of this guy speaking, and the pastor wrote like an apology that was like, we seek to be welcoming to all people. But the reality is he was saying the things that group they believe it. So what's my part in that, right? So there was this Reddit thread. Now I'm getting anecdotal. So there's this Reddit thread that about this event, and people were all talking about it. I've never been on Reddit. Someone showed it to me. I had to join Reddit. You're welcome, world, and comment on this. And I didn't say anything about that church. I just said, because people were like, I wish there was real churches that actually, we're actually welcoming and affirming. And so that was the thing, is I was like, so for what it's worth, I am an Episcopal priest at a church down the street from that church in Cincinnati, in Hyde Park, like here, we believe in the full inclusion and affirmation of LGBTQ plus people on all levels of ministry. We bless same-sex marriages. We have people across that gender and sexuality spectrum in all different kinds of areas of leadership in the church. We have ministries focused on that. We believe that you are who you are and that God made you this way. Like all of that stuff, like we are that. I didn't say anything about the other church, but I commented in that thread that was clearly about that other church.
Yeah.
But then should I also have been there on Sunday protesting? Like, because there were protesters on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a piece of that, and it's not because, well, I hope it's not because I just don't want to be like, oh, I don't want to cause any problems. I think that like we as Christian leaders, we have some kind of responsibility to rebuke, but we also have a responsibility to, I don't know.
Yeah, well, and to kind of like go off of that, I mean, there are a lot of churches here in the Nashville area that are, you know, kind of in that ilk of like very large kind of non-denominational or Baptist-ish, Church of Christ-ish congregations. And, you know, I know a lot of people who go to them that are kind of personally affirming, but they go to that church because whatever, they have a great childcare, they have great whatever speakers and small groups. And, you know, while I kind of personally would maybe not go to a church that wasn't outspokenly affirming, like there are people in those churches. So I think it's hard to be kind of like, we're not like those Christians when some of those Christians are maybe more like us.
Right.
And it's like, honestly, until I can guarantee that somebody can walk into an Episcopal church and not experience homophobia, not experience sexism, not experience sexual or spiritual abuse, I'm very hesitant to kind of say like, we're not like those Christians, because those things happen in Episcopal churches. Hopefully on a less systemic level than they happen in other churches. And hopefully at this point we've put into place, you know, guidelines and barriers and, you know, systems that can help address those things, but it doesn't mean that they won't happen at all. And that's really scary. And I think, I mean, given all, I've been listening to the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, the podcast.
Okay.
And which is fascinating listening. And some of my friends are like, why are you listening to that?
That's the Mark Driscoll Church up in Seattle?
Yes, this is Mark Driscoll's church up in Seattle. And I think one of the reasons I'm listening to it is because as a church leader, when I start to think this couldn't be me, or this couldn't happen at my church, or whatever those thoughts are, that's when we're sort of most in danger of maybe that happening. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm not on guard about the pride in my own heart, the things that I want to take credit for, the leadership that can, you know, if I want my way or the highway, like that kind of feeling, the moment I'm less aware of that stuff, the more like it can really slip in.
Yeah. But I understand, you know, Leslie's talking about like, but how do we, for those people who need safe space, like we do need to make clear to people that we are going to be a church that is genuinely affirming and inclusive in the truest sense of the word, or that we're going to seek to be.
Right, that at least strives
actively,
to be, you know?
And that we're actively striving for that and seeking for that.
Yes.
And that we have and this is an important point, that we actually have a theological framework. So for instance, I'm not saying you're welcome, even though I actually think that this is bad. I know that I want you at my church, even though we're going to treat you like we're never going to actually like officiate a wedding for you. And you'll have to live in a sort of, you know, an unspoken second class of citizenship in this church. But we're not going to talk about that because we love you and you're welcome. So let's just kind of, you know, don't ask, don't tell sort of thing. Yeah. We're at the Episcopal Church. We're not there. We're like, no. Like ask, tell, like be yourself, be who you are. Don't ask, don't tell actually is its own kind of damaging. I love you for your whole person. And by the way, I'm not good at it because I'm a person. So I'm going to screw this up a lot. And our church is going to screw this up a lot. However, to be able to say, like, we can talk about, for instance, a theological framework for reading the Bible that doesn't insist upon doesn't insist upon a heteronormativity, doesn't insist upon a patriarchy, doesn't insist upon the idea that there's only one kind of appropriate sexuality to express, and that is a heterosexual sexuality expressed within the confines of a very specific kind of marriage. That is it. If that is the only way, and everything else around that is sinful, like we can present a different narration. We can present a different narrative for what it means to read the Bible and to be in Christian community. And we have a very, like, I think now more than ever, so to speak, I think folks like us, we have a very, like, we should feel compelled to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I actually, I had a beer with my best friend's priest, well, fairly new rector at her church. And, then that was kind of one of the things that we're saying, like, there's, and my best friend really fought kind of long and hard along with some of the other, younger people at her church for their church to be very deliberate about being open and affirming. And they did the whole like believe out loud thing. And there were a lot of people kind of saying like, well, even if we are affirming, like, do we really need to like broadcast it or like make it part of our kind of branding? And like her response was yes, like we absolutely do. And sure enough, like it's one of those things that, if people have a rainbow flag outside of their church, like that's a loud and clear sign of like, hey, not only are we going to be kind of quietly like, sure, like, yeah, you can come to church here, like, and more of a like, no, you are like actively welcome. We want you here. We want the witness that LGBTQ people are to the church. We want to challenge our, heterosexism and this idea that there is only one kind of family structure that's holy, and and kind of what that might look like. And at the same time, I am in a church that has long been kind of LGBTQ affirming. And the other day I went to make to record a wedding, and sure enough, in our register, it's bride and groom.
Yep.
And that
just got a new register because of that.
Like that language is so ingrained in our publications and all this stuff. Then I kind of like, I looked at it and I sort of balked, and I was like, oh no,
Yeah. I even to the point where I have this one book I use for premarital counseling. And then I gave it to a same-sex couple that I was doing the work with. And I like, as I was giving it to them, it just dawned on me, like, it's a phenomenal book, by the way. It's really good. And it's not super conservative or anything, but it's just very heteronormative. It's just very heteronormative. It's not anti, it's just heteronormative.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, as I'm giving you this book, like I am realizing, and they were just gracious as all heck. They were like, we know the world we live in.
We're used to it.
We get it. And they know that I love them. And they're like, we'll glean from this what we need. And I was like, we don't have to. And they were like, no. We're fine. But I mean, but even the fact that, and they were very gracious about it and very wonderful. But that was my bad. I mean, like and so it's so ingrained.
I've had to do a lot of deliberate searching out of resources for things like that. And I would like to recommend this book, Modern Kinship, A Queer Guide to Christian Marriage. And as a great resource for those who are interested in these conversations. To kind of like really, and what I've found is that books like Modern Kinship, other resources that I've used, are equally useful for, different gender couples.
Right.
because it's all about, it's all about Christian marriage.
Well, we created these new liturgies that fit for same-sex blessings and then became same-sex marriages. And then all the cishets are like, wait, this is really good liturgy.
Yeah. Can I use this too? Yes, that's the point,
It turns out you can, right? And that's the whole concept of queering something. I think I said that, right? I think I get that, right? Like to allow ourselves as heteronormative people, part of a heteronormative culture, to allow ourselves to be influenced and impacted by, it's not just that you are welcome in my space.
Right.
The space is as much yours as it is mine.
Right. And I think that's where, especially the Episcopal Church, not only on issues of sexuality and gender, but especially race, how do we get out of our brains in this sort of white heterosexual American hegemony, and allow ourselves to be changed when we I don't even want to say welcome the other, but because it sounds like then they're coming onto our turf, but when we open ourselves to being changed by others. And I think, that's even true in, gosh, how many churches have you known or been a part of where people say they want young people, and then young people come in and they have new ideas?
Not like that.
Yeah.
I started I had someone say to me at a church I worked at, my presence and the work that I had done, we were bringing in younger people, and someone said, it's really wonderful actually that you're bringing in all these people, but I really feel like they need to be raised up to our level. We shouldn't be sinking to theirs. Straight face, in front of other people, with no sense that it wasn't gossipy or secretive. It was just a very in a formal meeting, obviously it's great that they're here. Now let's get them up to snuff.
Well,
and
I think the common complaint, especially is with when families with young children come in, and all of a sudden, the worship time is a little noisier and a little wigglier, and people's perception of worship as this very silent, serious, holy thing is challenged. Yeah. But don't we want young kids in worship?
No, we want them in the childcare until they're ready to be acolytes who are quiet, and then join the youth group, which is the youth group's the only group that's allowed to do any work around the church or do anything that's worth a damn. And then they better go off to college and forget about church, and then get married to the appropriate gender, settle down, and start all over again. Yeah, I will say we joke. I think there are some people, a few like that here, but at Redeemer, but the culture of this church, I think by and large is, but we're going to see, I'm going to be doing some pushing around making sure that children are more welcome, that it's a more welcoming space. And so I say that now, but we'll see what happened. So, I'm going to, go for it.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
I'll be right back.
I'm just going to step away for a second, and I'm going to talk to you all for just a minute. So, I'm going to talk to you directly, Leslie, and then to those others who are listening. And I'll just assume Kira will back me on this. When I talk about saying we shouldn't say we're like those other Christians, one of the things I'm always concerned about is having the capacity to think that we're better than others. And there is a long strain within our tradition, within this Episcopal Church, within this Anglican tradition, of really thinking that we do things properly. And I'm guilty of this, by the way. So I'm not speaking as some John the Baptist, of crying out in the wilderness, that there's a proper way to do things and that it's the right way. And I've been the guy who's seen certain vestments that I thought were not up to my standards or not attractive by my definitions. And I've been, I've been just catty and sort of dismissive. And I've been a person who's, I have all sorts of racist and sexist assumptions that I'm still working through. So there's a lot of places where I want to be really careful about what, when we say we're not like other Christians, what we're doing, to be careful about not being sort of arrogant about that. That being said, one of the areas you may have heard me talk about before in the church, and one of the areas that I think and this goes back to kind of what I was saying before, but I want to say it again and more like clearly and emphatically so there's no mistake. Episcopalians are quite often better at saying what we aren't than saying what we are. Well, we're not like those kinds of Christians ends up oftentimes being just the way we define ourselves. Fine. So what are you? Say that we are LGBTQ plus affirming. Say that while we are clearly still under the thrall of racism and sexism and all the rest, that we are trying to create a space where we have, for instance, women in areas of leadership where we look up to them and it's not a second tier citizenship or sort of like qualified leader, put a qualifier on it, that the leadership is what it is, that I don't need to speak, I don't need to approve of Kira to speak before Kira speaks, that Kira speaks on her own agency, that we have a space that acknowledge, for instance, we should be able to say what the Bible is. Mm-hmm. Don't just tell me you don't take it literally, because some of it you do take literally, actually. So we should be able to say the Bible is a collection of writings that the church has said points to the lordship of Jesus in the world. That when you take this collection of writings as a whole, it tells the story of the people of God, and it tells us the salvation history that is centered, as we believe, on Jesus. So the stories and the letters and the songs and the poems and the metaphors and the literal things are all put together as a way to point towards the reality of who Jesus is in the world. And that's why they exist, so that the Christian community may have some guidelines and some narrative around how they understand the lordship of Jesus and what that means for all of us and what that means for humanity. That is what I just did, whether you like it or not, or whether it's coherent or it's good or not, or you agree, it's at least a positive articulation of how I read the Bible, rather than just, I don't read it like those people. That requires of us is Christian formation. It requires us to take seriously teaching you what it means to be us. And to do that in a way that somehow isn't exclusive and just automatically shaming people for being different. That's some tricky territory. This is complicated. And our tradition experiences Christian formation most fully through its liturgy. It's the way that we worship. That's how our worship is the primary way that Episcopalians understand being formed as Christians, our gathered worship. And so that means, but we don't spend a lot of time in worship formally articulating an approach to reading the Bible or formally articulating an acceptance of LGBTQ plus people through a Christian lens. So that stuff ends up kind of, the leadership will do it. People like Kira and I will do the work, but are we helping our congregation to do that work? Are we explaining and instructing and living into a decolonized understanding of evangelism, so that instead of just not speaking about evangelism at all, we speak about evangelism from a decolonized and healthy Christian point of view. These are things that we have to do. This is on us, Kira and me, but it's on our congregation too, how we do that. And so anyhow, I started the vamping while Kira was gone, but it was great. It was great. You pull the string on the talking, on the chatting Kathy doll, and it's got to finish its round, so.
No, I think, as Episcopalians, and particularly as, I don't know about the folks who are watching or listening to this, but, I've got a lot of people in my congregation who have come out of other traditions, and in a kind of like, I am putting this aside for this thing. And it requires some, deconstruction is kind of the word I hear people use to talk about it. But once you deconstruct, then you have to construct something, right? So you need to be able to positively answer those questions. What is the Bible to me? Yeah. Who is Jesus to me? Yeah. How does Jesus relate to God in, my life? And those are really important. Of course, we spend our whole lifetime answering those questions in some sense. But I definitely agree with you, Phil, that it's certainly not enough to just kind of say like, this is not who we are. We need to also speak positively about who we are and what we believe and why we believe those things. I believe in liberation for all people because Jesus has liberated us from death in the resurrection and wants us all, God wants
into that.
Yeah, God wants us to be live in fulfillment of who God created us to be.
Yep.
And so those, those can be harder things to kind of say. They don't have pat answers like, well, the Bible is the word of God.
Right. Well, yes, it is. But in what way do you mean it? Like, in what way is it the word of God? Right. Because I grew up in a tradition where, because we say the Bible is the word of God, what we mean when we say that is that God wrote it or inspired it directly in such a way that, so if you say the earth wasn't created in 7 days, so you're calling God a liar. Literally. I mean, I've literally had someone say, and not like angrily, just say calmly, like, well, then you're calling God a liar. And I'm like, oh gosh, okay. So, but they weren't even being coy like that. Like that's, so even when we use words, like, I think you just tapped into something that's so big for me, which is that we refuse to have pat answers. Mm-hmm. But that, and put it in crude market terms, that hinders our marketability. This church down the road, they used this pandemic time and apparently some of their payroll protection money to repaint their building, and they rebranded. They got a new logo. It's very similar to the old logo, but it's got an arrow in it now, and they have a new slogan, Kira.
Ooh.
Are you ready for what it means to be church at that church?
I am. What is their logo?
Or their motto. I'm sorry, their motto. Born for adventure. Yep. Yeah.
I have a lot of questions.
So many, but most of it is just in pure anger. Because I'm just like, yes, that's what Jesus is about. Adventure. Jesus is really like the Indiana Jones of the Bible, just swinging through, and just making it right with his. He does have a whip, and when he drives people out of the temple. I mean, I could preach that sermon. Born for adventure, Kira. Are you born for adventure? Because that's what it means to be Christian, I guess.
I don't really like adventure that much.
No. Nope.
Well, I mean, I understand I'm not probably the kind of person that this church is wanting.
No, they want everybody. No, they're inclusive. They want everybody.
They want everybody.
Everybody.
I don't feel like it would be my vibe.
No.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about this Mars Hill podcast is that they were talking about just kind of the growth of megachurches in sort of the 90s and 2000s and the sort of marketing that went into that. And Saddleback Church had they had a drawing of a person that was called Saddleback Sam. And this was who they wanted to reach. And, it listed a whole bunch of characteristics of Saddleback Sam. Yes. He was a pretty busy professional guy. He was pretty satisfied with his life. Probably maybe didn't really think that he needed Jesus that much because things were kind of going well for him. He's got a family, he's got a cell phone, he's got, a good income.
He's got a house, right? He goes on vacation. Right. Yeah.
Right. And so this was the person that they were trying to reach, knowing that if they reached the Saddleback Sams of the world, that the Saddleback Sams would then bring their families. And it's just fascinating to me from a marketing standpoint. And an evangelism standpoint, because, we don't often think, I guess, who is our market? Who's our demographic?
No. And I do think there is a degree to which we could be a little bit more savvy.
A little bit more, serpent.
Self-aware would be great. Accessible would be wonderful. I mean, when you look at some of these churches, there is a focus on accessibility, where they will end up doing things like have like wheelchair ramps that some of our churches, I mean, ours is all ADA accessible, but like some of our older churches, they wouldn't even think about it. Or they'll make sure that if you come and you're hearing impaired, they're going to have something for you. I mean, there are some of these mega churches are really wonderful at saying like we will be accessible to you, and we're not going to create barriers between you and the divine if we can help it. But that's also in itself, I mean, like God creates God's own barriers. But like this church down the street, when they were first created by people who worked at Procter and Gamble, and they did literally the exact same thing. I mean, they used Saddleback as a model, and they created a logo that's a cross, but it looks like the head of a Phillips head screwdriver. Because they were trying to appeal to men, macho men, who all know about screwdrivers. And I don't know about like a cross. That's kind of Jesus-y, but that screwdriver, like that Phillips head screw, that top, that like equal-ended cross, that kind of, I'm comfortable with that. It's a little edgy. It's a little different. And I just see, we can denounce other people, it turns out, Leslie.
We're being skeptical, but
well, here's my concern is that being raised in a church, if you're a woman and you're being raised in a church that is patriarchal, it doesn't matter what people say about what they believe for you. You are being told that this is how God sees you. Even if you're not being told that directly, you're being told indirectly. And I don't need to tell you. I mean, the last thing I need to do is explain that to you, but I'm saying it more for the group. Yeah. And I'm acknowledging as a man that I see it. Like, I guess I want to say, I as a man also recognize this to be true. That growing up as a straight white male, but I noticed that all of the men in leadership and all of the men that everyone admired were taller than me, thinner than me, had more money than me. You notice that this is what we are telling you. This is what the norm is supposed to be, and this is how we see God's blessing. And then go further if you say, if one of my kids turned out to be gay, of course I would love them and welcome them as they are, of course, right? But you're taking them to a community and inculcating them. You're indoctrinating them and letting them soak in the reality of a community that doesn't actually love them for who they are, but who they're supposed to be. And so I do have some concerns, and I'm like not just about the fact that we're different from those places, but like the need for us to very clearly say what we are, because I actually do believe that a deep engagement with churches that promote heterosexuality as the only way that God blesses, that promote a patriarchal household and leadership style, that promote without even like white culture and Americanism, that's damaging to your relationship with Jesus Christ and damaging to your psyche. And so I think those things, and I shouldn't, and so I don't want to be, it's like we're Episcopalians, so we don't want to be rude.
Right.
But
yeah,
this is the dilemma. This is the dilemma.
My husband came home from work and we were talking about, his workplace has gone to a system where you have to prove that you are vaccinated to no longer wear a mask. So It's pretty obvious who has not been vaccinated because they're wearing masks.
Yeah.
And so I kind of said who, anybody you kind of know? And he said, well, this guy, but he's like really Christian. So that isn't that surprising to me. And I was like,
you're like, wait, I'm really Christian.
I was like, just out of curiosity, like, would you describe me as really Christian? Like, I'm literally a priest.
Right. I'm a professional Christian. I do it from Christian for a living.
And he was like, well, no, but you know what I mean, And that, I think, is where it gets challenging for me, because I wish that our brand, our type of Christian was the the dominant type of Christian, so that when people said, oh, they're really Christian, they meant they spend their Saturdays feeding the hungry, and they
right. They were trying to root out injustice, and
They
What if they're really Christian means they're someone that I can talk to without feeling judged? What if it meant that?
yeah.
What if it meant like they're a person through whom I experience genuine love and affection and faithfulness? Oh my gosh. That's what I want to build.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, you want to start a mega church with me? I'm kidding. We're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere.
Can you imagine?
Like, how do you just decide it's a mega church? Like, I don't know. You and I could do it. Like, we'd be really good at it.
I don't know. I mean, then that's a whole other conversation about sort of church planting and
No, I'm not. Listen, because here's the thing. It goes back to like, it is there. You have to, it is, whoever said churches should be mega?
yeah.
Who calls you when you get the diagnosis?
Well, one of the 18 pastors on staff, Phil.
Right. And our church, my church here is a larger church within the Episcopal tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But and so I'm sure others within our tradition would look at us and go like, who are you to talk? Like you got 3 pastors, you have 3 priests on staff, and that's fair. Mm-hmm. But I do think one of the things that we've tried to do is maintain a sense of you being connected and to one another. And I mean, it's a work in progress, but like you don't like the benefit of going and being anonymous and sitting in a rock concert and having someone give you a Bible themed VeggieTales pep talk, like it doesn't attract. It's not interesting to me. Or someone getting up and telling me for 45 minutes what the Bible really means also does not do it for me, So we can't probably use another word besides Christian, Leslie. I think we need to hold on to that one. But if you're interested, Leslie mentioned possibilities for alternates to Kingdom of Heaven or Kingdom of, what'd you say, Kingdom of Heaven?
Realm of God. People talk about blessed community. That's a big Episcopal word.
The realm of God, beloved community.
Beloved community.
A realm of God is a really anytime it says Kingdom of God, you could justly translate it as realm of God or reign of God. I heard McLaren once use the term Commonwealth, which I thought was a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a stretch linguistically. It's not actually that much of a stretch theologically, but it's a bit of a stretch linguistically.
Right.
And I'm enough of a word nerd that I was like, don't push it there, Brian.
Yeah.
But Bry, my old pal.
Bry.
Yeah.
Well, we've got just a couple minutes left. I hope we sort of answered the question, or at least
we sure did. We sure did something with it.
We did something, gave you some more to think about, and we'd love to field more of your questions in future weeks. But we are back for the
back at it.
Future.
Hey, Kira.
Hey.
What you been listening to?
I knew you were going to ask me this.
Should have known.
What have I been listening to? So my best friend's husband introduced me to I don't know if they're a duo, a trio, I think, called the Roaches, ROCHES.
I know them. Yeah. Okay. I know one of their songs, and it's real. Like they do, like, it's like, close harmonies, and
it's
the song I know is a cappella, I think.
Yeah. Some of it is. Yeah. So, they're an older group, from the late 70s.
How did we discover them at the same time? How did that happen?
I don't know. Must be something in the water.
I mean, that's really weird that you said that, because they popped up I'm trying to find the song. They popped up in my feed, and I'm trying to figure out what song. You're right. They're all like 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
There was one of their songs that popped up. That's crazy that you just said that to me.
So, and some of their music is very like funny. It has some humor to it.
Yes.
But it's not like it's not like a comedy album or something.
No. My daughter wanted to hear, I put this on Facebook, so some of you have heard this, but I put on Metallica the other day. It was just me and my daughter, and I thought she could handle Enter Sandman. Da-na-na-na-na, and it starts, and she just goes, she just goes, "Hey, Daddy, are there any girls in this rock group?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Well, could we listen to some that have girls in it? You jerk." I was just like, I wanted to be like, I mean, we can, but also you can like Metallica. But instead I was like, yeah, of course. And so I'm like, immediately I'm like, I got to move fast. And there's so many options, right? And for whatever reason, I was just like, all right, I'm playing Hole for my daughter.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I just hit the first song on the tops, and it was Celebrity Skin, which is fine. It's a good song. But then Violet came on, which is like their big breakthrough hit from Live Through This, where she's like yelling, "Go on, take everything," you know, like, and I played that, and I played the first song, and she goes, "So that was good." Like that. She goes, "So that was good." And I was like, "Yeah, it's good." So then I played Violet, and she goes, "That was the best rock song I've ever heard in my life."
Yes.
And so we listened to Hole, and then yesterday I introduced her to L7.
Okay, wow.
This morning, I'm like, "What do you want to listen to?" She was like, "Can I listen to L7?" And I was like, "We can. They're pretty heavy. Some of those lyrics I'm going to get in trouble for, but yes, we can listen to L7." So we're getting to some heavier rock and roll that is not androcentric. How about that?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, let me tell you something. My dad, when I was a teenager, like young teenager to like middle teens, those were the Lilith Fair years.
Ah, wow.
And my dad, bless him, took me to Lilith Fair. Just
Did you have your hair up in little buns? That's probably too Coachella. We're too old for that. That's fantastic, though, Kira.
And you know, those are some of my favorite memories with my dad of just you know, going to Lilith Fair, my dad taking his teenage daughter before I was able to drive to Lilith Fair. So you got to have those like those dad moments that are like also affirming, or like
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a house with it was my dad and my mom and three boys. And my mom grew up as a tomboy by her own words. And so there wasn't and so she never really saw herself as a super sort of feminine woman. That's not how she would talk about herself. She would describe being a tomboy. And so I'm trying to be really sensitive to this daughter, how I try to honor that. And I mean, it's just new to me, right? It's all new. But one way I can do that is by playing L7 and Hole and stuff like that, getting her into and just, she'll notice stuff. We watched The Sandlot, and she was like, "This is a good movie, but it's all boys." And I was like, "I know, I'm sorry. It's from my childhood when we didn't care about girls. I didn't say that, but that's the reality." It's like,
I know. I mean, even I will kind of notice stuff like that. Like I'll be watching a movie that, has Oscar buzz or whatever. And I'll be like, where are the women in this movie?
I forget, are you a person that grew up with or without Star Wars in your life?
Kind of without. I mean, okay. I remember watching it.
So I grew up with it deeply entrenched. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until recently that there's this scene, there's this scene where after Obi-Wan Kenobi is killed, this is the first movie, y'all should know that by now, that Princess Leia's comforting Luke Skywalker. And someone was like, "Yeah, she had her whole home planet blown up 24 hours ago, but she's got to comfort the guy who lost his mentor that he'd known for 3 days." That sounds right.
That sounds right.
That sounds right. She's fine. Her entire planet was destroyed. That's where she keeps all her stuff. It was destroyed. And she's like, "Sorry about your friend that you've known for a minute." And if Leia had expressed any kind of grief or shown, we wouldn't even, what a bummer that would have been.
Right.
Anyways, that's a whole other conversation. And we're now way past time.
We are. We're a little bit past time. So
You're
great to
awesome.
be with you all again. It's great to be back with you, Phil.
You're a gift. You're a gift to me. This is wonderful.
Ask us questions.
Leslie, thanks. Yes, please send us more questions. Everybody, if you're watching this live, if you're watching it recorded, if you've someone showed it to you as a friend, I think we're going to be having this on audio only podcast. You can listen to it. Jump in.
Yeah.
And send us a question. Yeah.
Great to be with you. Hope to see you next week on Are You There, God? It's Kira and Phil.
Bye.
Bye.